Hi, it's Wasay Mehdi, and I'm doing a presentation on Jacobson versus Katzer, which was a controversy over infringement on open source software, which was a court case in 2006. And this is me, Wasay Mehdi. So some background on the case. Jacobson started Java Model Railroad Interface, aka JMRI, which was an open source software, which he used to create an application called Decoder Pro. This JMRI was available as open source, and it was used to create interfaces to model trains, and it was distributed freely to anyone who asked, and also was used to make some public applications. It was also protected by the artistic license included in the repository. Katzer was the owner of KAMIND Associates and made a commercial product called Decoder Demander, which was also used to model trains and had some patents on some of these technologies or interfaces that he was using. So the issue is that Jacobson argued that Katzer used textual files from his project without proper documentation, such as credit to the person who made it, and parts of his code weren't documented properly and given credit for. And he said that under the artistic license that was included in his repository, this constituted as a violation of copyright. Katzer, on the other hand, argued that since there was no damages caused, since there was no monetary gain for Jacobson on the open source software, it couldn't breach artistic license and it wasn't causing any damages, and therefore he cannot be sued for it. So the first lawsuit was presented to the district court, and Jacobson had made a few claims to the district court, and said that there was a copyright infringement by stripping the artistic license information from the repository. So since Katzer didn't include the proper documentation, the proper credit to Jacobson, it was actually under copyright violation. He also said Katzer breached the contract under the artistic license, claiming that by stripping the artistic license by not including the proper documentation, giving Jacobson credit, and letting people find him, and by gaining monetary value from his open source software, Katzer was breaching the contract under his artistic license. And thirdly, he claimed that under the DMCA, Katzer, by stripping the licensing information from his source code and his license information on top of his code, Katzer was violating the DMCA. On the other hand, the Katzer, the defendant, claimed that the copyright infringement the copyright that Jacobson has on his code was actually made after he allegedly took the code and used it in his commercial product. And secondly, Katzer argued that he could not breach the contract because there was no monetary loss, like I said before. Since Jacobson wasn't profiting directly from his open source software, there was no monetary loss on the end of Katzer, or on the end of Jacobson, and Katzer therefore cannot be held liable. He also said that removing the license information in the license metadata from the open source software doesn't actually constitute under the DMCA because it was available freely and distributed freely. So under the district court, the court ruled that they dropped all the charges and said that it actually does not count as copyright infringement under the current laws, and that just because since it was open source software, Katzer was allowed to freely use it in his commercial product. But Jacobson appealed this to the circuit court, and the circuit court actually overruled the district court's standings and said that the lack of monetary exchange in open source products does not mean the copyright is invalid. Just because Jacobson isn't gaining monetary value from the copyright doesn't mean there isn't value to be gained for Jacobson by getting credit in the commercial software. And also they held a precedent that artistic license is enforceable under copyright infringement for open source software. So some questions that arise from this are, do you think that the courts treated the situation fairly? Who do you think will get the better end of this deal? Do you think that Katzer was in the right, assuming that he could use parts of Jacobson's open source software, since it was open publicly? A lot of people do use publicly available code for bases in their own models. And do you think Jacobson was in the right, thinking his files were protected under copyright, and was in the right to sue Katzer?